Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the winter of 1944. The ground is iron-hard, the air bites with a cold that penetrates wool and leather alike, and the shelter you call home is little more than a corrugated steel shell half buried in mud. There is no central heating, no hardware store, and no insulation contractor. There is only ingenuity, desperation, and whatever your hands can find. This is the world that ordinary men and women learn to master, and the lessons they left behind are more relevant today than most survivalists realize. The science of staying warm with nothing. Long before cellulose insulation became a commercially refined product, soldiers and civilians navigating the brutal winters of the Second World War understood something fundamental about heat retention. Trapped air is your greatest ally. Paper in its layered form creates thousands of tiny air pockets that resist the movement of cold. It is draft-proof, lightweight, and in a world rationed down to its bones, it was everywhere. Newspapers were stuffed beneath linoleum floors, packed between wall boards, and layered inside clothing as an emergency wind barrier. The science was intuitive rather than academic, born from necessity rather than engineering, and it worked with remarkable effectiveness, given how crude the application was. Anderson shelters and the art of making do. The Anderson shelter, that iconic corrugated iron half-pipe sunk into the back gardens of wartime Britain, was notoriously hostile to comfort. It flooded, it condensed, and on bitter nights it became a cold trap rather than a refuge. Families improvised constantly, hot bricks wrapped in cloth, salvaged carpet scraps, layers of sacking. Paper was woven into this patchwork of solutions, wherever it could be pressed into service. Thick layers of folded broadsheet newspaper, wedged against the curved walls and beneath wooden bunkboards, provided a surprisingly effective buffer against radiated cold. Wartime memoirs and oral histories described the rustle of paper underfoot, the smell of damp newsprint mingling with paraffin lamp smoke, small sensory details that speak to a universal human drive to transform even the most brutal space into something bearable. Letters, mementos, and the emotional architecture of shelter. It is worth being precise here because honesty is what separates genuine fieldcraft education from romanticized mythology. There is no historically documented widespread practice of deliberately using love letters as insulation material. What is true, and deeply fascinating, is that personal correspondence from this era is regularly discovered during renovations, tucked inside wall cavities, beneath floorboards, pressed between layers of old boarding. These letters were hidden deliberately, preserved as mementos or forgotten in the chaos of wartime upheaval, not packed in as thermal mass. The emotionally compelling narrative that links them directly to a recognized insulation method is almost certainly an embellishment, a story that feels like it should be true because it captures the poignant collision between survival and sentiment so perfectly. What wartime fieldcraft actually teaches us. Strip away the mythology and what remains is still extraordinary. The wartime generation developed a relationship with material resourcefulness that modern survivalists spend years trying to reconstruct. They understood layering systems intuitively, managed moisture in confined spaces without modern vapor barriers, and maintained functional shelter under conditions that would defeat most contemporary campers within hours. The real lesson is not about love letters. It is about the cognitive shift that occurs when scarcity becomes absolute. When you stop seeing newspaper as something to read and start seeing it as insulation, fire starter, wound packing, and morale anchor simultaneously. carrying these lessons forward. The fieldcraft of the wartime era deserves to be studied with rigor and respect, which means holding the vivid stories to the same standard as the practical techniques. Both have value. The documented methods, layered paper insulation, improvised draft proofing, adaptive use of available materials are genuinely transferable skills for anyone serious about preparedness and bushcraft. The stories, even when apocryphal, point towards something true about human resilience under pressure. Bring both into your practice, but know the difference. If this kind of deep dive fieldcraft history speaks to you, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this episode with anyone who believes that understanding the past is the sharpest survival tool you can carry. The old ways are worth knowing. All of them, honestly.